Hello, welcome to Dragon Boat Dynasty, a podcast where I share my experiences in building, coaching, and scaling a Dragon Boat team. My name is Sean, and I'm the head coach of Argo Naga Dragon Boat team, with over 100 active members based in Malaysia. From the very beginning of our team's history, we carried a lot of our technique and race strategy from team that all the founders of Argo Naga came from, and it made sense at the time because the strategies that was applied by that team was a very solid strategy, and it made sense to actually adopt the strategy. So one of the distinctive element of the strategy is the use of the 5-10 stroke block. So what do I mean by 5-10 stroke block is that we set our strategies based on sets of 5 or sets of 10. So for example, the race starts will always either 5 or 10 jerk strokes, followed by 10 to 30 sprints. Then during maintenance, we will call for a hard 10. So these are all 5 and 10 blocks. And during all outs, we would usually ram the sets in sets of 10 or sets of 5. So when we visited Singapore, we noticed something very strange. When they were doing race simulations, they were actually calling 4s and 8s instead of 5s and 10s. So we realized that they were actually using stroke blocks of 4 and 8s as opposed to 5 and 10s. And the strategies are very similar to ours, except theirs was on a 4-8 set and ours on a 5-10 set. So at that point, I figured something out. There was a theory that I needed to test out, right? If we can achieve the same result in terms of distance or speed, right, and time, with 8 strokes instead of 10, we would essentially be able to make our strokes 20% more effective. Every result that would have taken, let's say, 100 strokes, right, could be completed in 80 strokes. That was the theory. So we needed to test it out. So what we did was, we started by looking out for a benchmark. So for example, 10-30 stroke would get us to 100 meters, for example, let's say, right? So if we were to reduce the strokes by 20%, so instead of 10-30, we would go 8-24. So in sets of 8, in a race set of 8-24, if we can achieve 100 meters, we will be able to improve our timing by 20%. So we started trying this out by changing our regular calls from 5-10 to 4-8s. It was quite tough in the beginning because we were very used to our old habits, our old strokes, but that wasn't much of an issue. So eventually, in a couple of months, we were able to start doing it. And then we started using our old race sets as benchmarks. We started using a 100 meter as benchmarks, and we broke them down and timed them according to sections. So we had a benchmark, right? Then we compare all our blocks, our new blocks against our old blocks. So for example, if we were to do a race start of 10:30, we can reach 100 meters, let's say. So what we wanted to do was to use the 8:24 to achieve the 100 meters. And if we could not achieve it, we would figure out how far along are we in terms of distance and time, and then try to find ways to improve our efficiency and stroke effectiveness in order to be able to achieve 100 meters or as close as possible to 100 meters within that 8:24. So this was the part where we started to go back to the basics and try to improve our stroke as much as possible, because in order to ensure that our stroke was more effective, we had to go back to the basics, the rudimentary part of it, the fundamentals, to work on every single stroke to make sure that we are maximizing the potential of each and every one of them. So then I realized that improving our stroke efficiency by 20% is really tough. I mean, I didn't realize it at first because I saw it as like, for every 10 strokes, we are shaving off 2 strokes, right? But I didn't see the part where for every 100 strokes, we are shaving off 20 strokes, and that matters a lot. That makes a lot of difference. So then I realized something. The number of strokes in a section of the race set didn't really matter at all. What matters actually is the efficiency of the stroke. If we do 8 strokes and improve efficiency, right, let's say, for example, if we can do if we manage to do an 824 and achieve 100 meters, if we were to transform that same level of stroke efficiency and effectiveness to 510, we would essentially be increasing the result by a whopping 25%. So instead of improving by 20% by going to 4.8, if we would have kept it at 5.10 and improved stroke, we would increase by 25%. So the only difference is when we get out of one section and into another section compared to teams that use the 4.8 strategy. Let's say, for example, at every cycle, right, we take 10 strokes as opposed to another team that takes 8 strokes. We would miss that cycle by 2 strokes per cycle. And staying longer in the race set in that cycle as opposed to another team who has already moved on to a next cycle may not be a bad thing in the first place. Maybe staying in the race start for slightly longer than some other team who's using 4.8, we may be able to push a bit further as they enter into the maintenance stage. And during the time, we were also faced with another issue as well. At that point of time, the team has actually grown enough of experimenting, and they're kind of tired of experimentation, and they want to hunker down and just work on one technique and get good at it, which isn't a very bad thing, because at some point of time we have to face the fact that tweaking technique will not be able to get us very far, and it all comes down to all this hard work and getting good at this. What Bruce Lee says, right? Fear not the person who does 1,000 things once. Fear the person who does one thing 1,000 times. So at that point, that was the last major experimentation that we ever had, and after that it was all just doing the same thing over and over again. And I suppose that was the time when we found out that I found out that the whole science of reducing your number of stroke per cycle has absolutely no effect. It really doesn't matter how your cycle works. What matters is how you execute your cycle. That's the key. So yeah, that's all for this week's episode. It's a rather short one. You can catch all the episodes of this podcast on YouTube and Spotify. And if you've made it this far, this would be episode number 8, I suppose. You're probably one of the very few who have found the content quite interesting. It would really help if you could help just share it with one person about this podcast, and probably that person will be able to see some value in it, or at the very least listen to me bullshit my way through every single week. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.